Excuse me, ma'am, but I think I know what's wrong with the engine.
A childish voice rang out, and instantly every head turned, eyes widening in shock. Inside a billion-dollar testing facility where 30 engineers graduates of MIT, Stanford, and Carnegie Mellon had already admitted defeat, the very last thing anyone expected was the voice of a child. In that moment, no one dared to move. The prototype engine, the machine that could change the course of automotive history, lay motionless, a cold block of steel refusing to surrender its secret. And yet there was one who dared to challenge it. From the far corner of the white laboratory that smelled sharply of disinfectant, a 9-year-old black girl stepped forward. Her loose, natural curls framed a face streaked with grease, her oversized overalls smeared from hours of tinkering. Tiny hands pointed at the machine that had humbled the world's best minds. The moment seemed absurd, almost laughable, but in truth it marked the beginning of everything. But the story hadn't started here. It had begun 3 weeks earlier, far away from marble floors and million-dollar machines, in the cramped apartment 4B of the Steelton housing complex, Marigold Hutchkins. A young black girl pressed her nose against the rain-streaked window, quietly watching the last of the night shift workers shuffle home, passing beneath the shadow of the old General Motors plant that had once been the pride of the city. Now it stood like a giant skeleton, its shattered windows reflecting the gray October sky. She traced shapes on the misted glass, while the rasping cough of Bertie, her 6-year-old brother, split the silence, a sound wheezing from his small chest through the paper-thin walls. "Mari, come help me for a minute." Her father's voice called from the kitchen, heavy as if weighed down by yet another disappointment. On the table lay another rejection letter. At 38, Clement Hutchkins looked far older than his years. His shoulders were bent from decades on the assembly line, a line that no longer existed. His unemployment benefits had ended 2 months earlier, while stacks of medical bills kept climbing every week. Marigold turned from the window and saw her father's rough hands trembling as he shuffled the debt notices across the scratched Formica table. Bills from Steelton General Hospital, overdue notices from the electric company, a final warning from the landlord. The papers lay in a row, like links of a chain tightening around the small kitchen. "What do you need me to do?" Dad, Marigold asked, softly pulling out a rickety chair to sit across from him. At 9, she was already sharp enough to know those numbers spelled danger. "Help me sort them by date. Maybe if I organize them, I'll find one I can delay." Clement said, eyes lowered, avoiding hers. Marigold picked up a hospital bill for $2,847, staring at the medical codes she couldn't understand. What she did know was that Bertie's breathing grew worse every day, and each visit to Dr. Cross ended with another bill they couldn't pay. "Dad, maybe you could ask Mr. Obie Sterling if he's got some work," she suggested, remembering the kind-hearted neighborhood mechanic. Clement gave a dry laugh. "Obie's got his own troubles, honey. Nobody's bringing their cars in when everyone's broke. Around here, if a car breaks down, it just sits in the street." Outside the window, rusting cars lined the curb, silent monuments to a lost age of industry. Then another fit of coughing tore through the apartment, Bertie's small body convulsing with each wheeze. His chest rattled as if someone were squeezing the air from his lungs. Dr. Cross had mentioned chronic bronchitis and the risk of it turning into asthma, but the medicine cost as much as gold, completely out of reach. "I have to take him to the hospital," Clement whispered. "With what money?" Dad, Marigold asked quietly. Her words cut through him like a blade of truth. Just then, a loud knock pounded on the door. From the hall came the muffled noise of a neighbor's TV and shuffling feet. Clement opened it to find the pale yellow light falling across the badge of Cordelia Nash, a social worker. Her voice was steady, official, but tinged with sympathy. "I need to discuss your children's welfare case." Marigold's heart sank. At school, she'd overheard stories about kids taken away when families couldn't provide. The thought of being separated from her father and brother made her chest ache. Clement forced a polite tone. "Kids, go to your room." But Marigold shook her head. "I want to stay." At 9, she had already learned to read the worry in her father's face. She wasn't about to hide. Cordelia scanned the small apartment, old furniture, but clean. The floor swept through the vinyl tiles cracked. The problem wasn't neglect, but poverty eating everything alive. "I've received reports about Bertie's health," she began. The school nurse is concerned about his absences and lack of consistent treatment. I do take him to the doctor, Clement said quickly. Emergency visits can't replace regular care, Cordelia replied. A child with his condition needs steady medication, possibly a specialist. Marigold noticed her father's hands clench and release the weight of a canceled follow-up appointment and a $200 prescription pressing on him. I'm trying, he whispered. There'll be work somewhere. Detroit, Chicago, anywhere. Cordelia softened her tone. I'm not here to judge, but I have to put the child's welfare first. If Bertie's condition continues to worsen. She didn't finish, but the shadow of separation loomed over the room. After she left, promising to return next week, Clement collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands. Marigold placed her tiny hand on his shoulder. It's going to be okay, Dad. But even she wasn't sure she believed it. I don't know what to do anymore. Clement choked. That night, when Bertie finally fell asleep after another fit of coughing and Clement retreated to his room in exhaustion, Marigold slipped on her coat and crept outside. The October wind bit at her bare arms, but she didn't care. Steelton's streets lay empty, dim streetlights guiding her to Industrial Avenue. Obadiah Sterling's garage sat wedged between a shuttered diner and a pawn shop. Its roll-up door cracked open beneath a flickering light. Marigold had been coming here since she was 7, mesmerized by the clang of tools, the smell of grease, and the magic of machines coming back to life. Obi, as everyone called him, had never turned her away. He always gave her little jobs to do. Tonight he was bent under the hood of a 1998 Ford, his seasoned hands moving with the precision of a surgeon. At 62, he had spent his life with engines, and his reputation for fixing the unfixable still kept his shop alive while bigger garages had folded. Out late, aren't you, Mari? He said without looking up. I couldn't sleep, she admitted, perching on the old milk crate by the bench. Obi, have you ever fixed something everyone else said was impossible? He glanced up, wiped his hands on a rag, and smiled faintly. Every day, kiddo. Most folks look at a broken machine and see 100 reasons it won't run. The trick is to find one reason it will. Marigold nodded, the words sinking deep. She had seen him revive cars that others called dead. His hands seemed to speak the language of steel and wires. Why are you thinking about the impossible tonight? He asked, settling on the stool beside her. So she told him everything, the visit from Cordelia Nash Birdie's worsening illness, the bills piling higher. Obi listened in silence, his gray eyes reflecting the weary understanding of a man who had seen people break just like machines. Finally, he said, You know the difference between a busted car and a busted life? Marigold shook her head. A car comes with a manual, life doesn't. He pointed to the pickup he was fixing. This belongs to Mrs. Patterson over on Elm. Been running rough for months, misfiring on 3 cylinders. She couldn't afford the repair. Think I fixed it? Probably not, Marigold guessed. Obi chuckled. Already did. The problem wasn't the cylinders, just a hairline crack in the fuel line. Every other mechanic missed it because they were looking for something big. Sometimes the biggest problem comes from the smallest part. As if on cue, the old radio in the corner crackled to life with the evening news. The announcer's voice filled the little garage, speaking of a world far removed from Steelton's struggles. Ashworth Industries announced today that development of their revolutionary engine remains stalled. CEO Evangeline Ashworth has issued an unprecedented challenge, offering a $1 million prize to anyone who can solve the technical problem that has stumped her entire team of experts. Marigold froze. $1 million. The number rang in her head like a bell, shaking awake a long-buried hope. Obi turned up the volume. The announcer went on the prototype engine promised to be more fuel-efficient and environmentally friendly than any car on the market. But for months, even the brightest engineers had failed. Obi let out a low laugh. That's fairy tale money. But if I had 10 minutes alone with that machine. Why do you want to try? Marigold asked curiously. He shrugged. The flaw could be anywhere, but I'll bet you a candy bar it's nothing more than some small detail the highly educated engineers overlooked because their minds kept chasing overly complicated explanations. Marigold sat in silence, her eyes fixed on the radio, even as the program shifted to weather and sports. $1 million, that kind of money could wipe away all of her family's burdens. It could pay for Bertie's medicine, cover the rent, and help her father finally find honest work without being humiliated by his threadbare appearance. Uncle Obi, She spoke slowly. "What if someone like me wanted to try fixing that engine?" He raised an eyebrow. "Someone like you, and not an engineer, no degree, just relying on how things make sense when you take them apart." He studied her for a long moment. For the past 3 years, Obi had watched Marigold's mechanical instincts grow sharper by the day, reminding him of his own daughter, Evangeline Sterling, who was now studying engineering at the university. In truth, he answered cautiously, anyone can submit a solution. The question is, how would you even get access to the machine to figure out what it's hiding? Marigold didn't have an answer, but as she walked home through the cold night streets of Steelton, her mind was already turning. Somewhere out there in a faraway laboratory sat a machine waiting to be understood, and for the first time in months she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she was the one who could do it. The very next day brought news that set the whole town buzzing. Evangeline Ashworth announced she would personally oversee an open challenge. Anyone could register, no degree required, and the test would be held right at Ashworth Industries headquarters in Steelton. When the announcement crackled over Mrs. Patterson's radio, Marigold felt a jolt run through her chest. It wasn't exactly hope, it was something even more dangerous, possibility. In Steelton, where opportunities were rarer than steady jobs, that feeling was worth more than gold. Marigold raced to find her father and discovered him slumped over yet another rejection letter, this time from a factory in Gary. His shoulders sagged, his eyes dull with the dust of disappointment. "Dad," Marigold said, her voice carrying a rare grown-up weight. "I want to try something." Clement lifted his head, and for an instant his gaze lit up, reminding her of the father who once believed smart girls could change the world if only they were brave enough to step forward. "What is it, sweetheart?" he asked. Marigold drew a deep breath and told him about the engine, the challenge, and the 1-in-a-million chance that her small hands might work a miracle. As she spoke, Clement's expression shifted from surprise to worry, and finally to a glimmering pride. He held her frail fingers tightly in his rough, calloused hands. "Mari," he whispered, "you know the odds are. I know she cut him off, but Uncle Obi said sometimes the biggest problems come from the smallest causes. Dad, what if I see what they've missed?" From the living room came Bertie's labored breathing, a sharp reminder of what was at stake if they missed this chance. Clement glanced toward the sound, then back at his daughter's determined face. "All right," he said softly. "Then let's figure out how a 9-year-old girl submits an application to fix a $1 million machine." As autumn deepened over Steelton, Marigold entered the most important preparation of her life. She read anything she could find on engines, spent hours in Obi's garage learning advanced mechanics, and practiced explaining complicated engineering concepts in the simplest terms. Yet nothing could truly prepare her for the moment she would stand inside a $1 billion laboratory face to face with the unsolvable machine and the 30 engineers who had already declared defeat. That day came sooner than she expected. Ashworth Industries' headquarters rose above the Steelton skyline like a needle of glass 43 stories vanishing into low gray clouds. In Obi's battered pickup truck, Marigold pressed her face to the window, staring up in awe. Nervous, Obi asked as he steered through the city's sluggish traffic, a city that had long since forgotten how to hurry. Terrified, she admitted clutching the manila folder that held her handwritten application, 3 carefully written pages and diagrams born from countless sleepless nights. In the back seat, Clement wore his best shirt and a borrowed tie from Pastor Blake. He insisted on coming even when his daughter argued she could handle it herself. Some things, he said, parents need to be there for, even if they feel as out of place in a glass tower as a wrench in a jewelry box. The grand lobby opened before them like a cathedral of commerce, gleaming marble floors, a ceiling so high every footstep echoed. People in tailored suits walked with brisk confidence, speaking the language of profits and stock shares, foreign words to ears like theirs. "May I help you?" the receptionist asked her, smile, polite but chilly. The nameplate on her desk read Diane Walsh. Her manicured hands hovered above a keyboard that probably cost more than the Hutchkins family's monthly expenses. "We're here for the engine challenge," Clement replied, his voice steadier than Marigold expected. "My daughter wants to submit an application." Diane's smile faltered slightly, her gaze flicking from his borrowed tie to Marigold, a young black girl in a neatly pressed but clearly worn dress. "I see. And how old is your daughter?" 9. Marigold answered before her father could. The announcement didn't mention an age limit. Diane's eyebrows lifted. True, it did not. She picked up the phone, whispering to someone on the other end, her expression showing this was a situation that required a higher authority. While they waited, Marigold looked up at the enormous portrait hanging on the opposite wall. Cornelius Ashworth, the company's founder, stared down with the stern eyes of a man who had built an empire from a single toolbox and a dream back in 1952. A brass plaque beneath the painting declared he had turned Ashworth into one of the Midwest's automotive giants. The sharp sound of footsteps on marble made all three turn. A woman in her 30s approached, radiating authority. "I'm Janet Morrison, executive assistant to Mr. Nash. I understand this young lady is interested in our technical challenge." "Yes, ma'am," Marigold replied, handing over her folder. "I've prepared an application with analysis and theoretical solutions." Janet skimmed the papers with the practiced eye of someone used to dismissing hundreds of unqualified candidates. But as she read more closely, her expression began to shift. "These diagrams," she pointed. "You drew these yourself?" "Yes, ma'am. Based on my understanding of combustion efficiency and airflow dynamics." Janet closed the folder, her look now carrying genuine interest. "Wait here. I need to speak directly with Mr. Nash." 20 minutes crawled by, filled only by the bustling sounds of corporate life around them. Clement fiddled nervously with his borrowed tie, while Marigold sat perfectly still, her mind racing like gears, reviewing every lesson she had learned in Obi's garage. When Janet returned, she wasn't alone. At her side stood a tall, commanding man in his 50s, whose presence seemed to quiet the entire room. Bartholomew Nash, the chief technical officer of Ashworth Industries, the man leading projects that could redefine the future of the automobile. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed, his suit expertly tailored, every step radiating the confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime solving impossible problems. "Miss Hutchkins," he said, extending his hand in a voice both deep and courteous. "I'm Bartholomew Nash. I've reviewed your application, and I must say your grasp of internal combustion principles is astonishing for someone your age." Marigold stood shaking his hand firmly, remembering Obi's advice: the first impression could either open a door or slam it shut. "Thank you, sir. I've been studying engines since I was 7. He nodded, glancing again at the drawings. "The adjustments you propose to improve the fuel-air mixture show remarkable insight." His eyes narrowed with the scrutiny of an engineer weighing a design both raw and promising. However, he continued carefully, "You do realize this challenge involves cutting-edge technology. It isn't as simple as tweaking a carburetor or replacing a spark plug." Marigold lifted her chin, her voice steady. "I understand, sir, but sometimes the most complex problems require the simplest solutions." Nash arched a brow, the corner of his mouth lifting in the faintest smile. "An interesting philosophy. So tell me what makes you believe you can succeed where my team of specialists has been stuck for months." Marigold drew in a deep breath. This was her one chance to prove herself, because experts often see what they expect to see, not what's actually there. "My friend Mr. Sterling taught me that machines don't care about degrees or reputations. They just need to be understood." Nash nodded slowly, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "Sterling sounds like a wise man." "Very well, Miss Hutchkins. I can't promise you'll be selected, but I'll allow your application to move through our standard evaluation process." "And what exactly is that process?" Clement asked, speaking for the first time since Nash arrived. The executive explained all candidates must first pass a preliminary exam to demonstrate basic mechanical competence. Those who qualify will advance to the official trial, where each has 1 hour to diagnose and repair the prototype engine. Marigold's heart pounded. "When is the exam?" "Tomorrow morning at 8, Nash replied. "I should warn you, we've received over 200 applications from seasoned mechanics, automotive engineers, and technical specialists from across the country. The competition will be fierce." Leaving the corporate tower, the group stopped at a small diner on the edge of town. The cracked leather booths and faded photographs of Steelton's once thriving industrial days hung on the walls, a sharp contrast to the glittering headquarters they had just left behind. Clement shook his head in disbelief. "I still can't believe they even considered you. You walked right up to that man and talked about air-to-fuel ratios like a college student." Obi tapped his spoon against a slice of apple pie, speaking slowly. She's been learning all along, just not in a classroom. Mari has something schools can't teach. She listens to machines. Marigold only pushed the food around her plate, her stomach knotted with worry. Obi, what if I fail tomorrow? What if I forget everything? He shrugged. Then at least you tried. But I don't think you'll forget. Tell me, has there ever been an engine you couldn't figure out tomorrow will be no different? Back home, Birdie was waiting by the window, his face pressed against the glass, a shadow of his sister from a few nights before. His breathing was heavy and wheezing. How did it go? He asked softly. Marigold sat down beside him, wrapping an arm around his thin shoulders. Tomorrow is the test. If I pass, I'll get the chance to work on that engine, and maybe earn enough money for your medicine. Birdie's eyes lit up, fragile hope shining through his sickness. Mari's chest tightened at the sight. It's possible, Birdie. I'll do my very best. News of the little girl's bold plan spread quickly through the housing complex. Neighbors stopped by, bringing not just food, but belief. Mrs. Patterson arrived with a tin of cookies and helped Mari rehearse how to explain mechanical concepts in simple words. People might ask anything, you have to be ready. Pastor Blake came too, carrying a battered old toolbox that had belonged to his father. You'll need these tomorrow, he said, placing it on the table. They belonged to a man who believed honest work was a way of honoring God. The cramped apartment swelled with something rare, community hope. Late into the night, Marigold laid the tools out on her bed, getting to know each piece, imagining how they might help her the next day. Sleep came only in fragments, broken by dreams of whispering engines and shifting exams. Near dawn, she finally drifted off to the sound of Birdie's labored breaths and her father's hushed prayers from the next room. Morning light spilled amber over Steelton. Marigold stood by the window, already dressed, her eyes fixed on the glowing Ashworth facility that rose in the distance like a stage. Her hands trembled as she arranged Pastor Blake's toolbox tools that had built houses, repaired machines, and kept families running through lean years. Today they would bear witness to either a miracle or a failure. You're up early, Clement said, stepping in with a mug of coffee. He hadn't slept either, pacing through the night to check on Birdie. I couldn't, Marigold admitted. I keep hearing Mr. Nash's words in my head. 200 candidates, all more experienced than me. Clement walked over and knelt before her, his calloused hands wrapping around her small ones. Mari, remember this. They may have the degrees and the years of work, but they don't have what you have. What's that, Dad? You see things differently. You always have. Remember when Mrs. Patterson's washing machine flooded? 3 repairmen gave up, but you just listened to the spin cycle and spotted the kinked drain hose. Marigold smiled faintly, the tension easing. It only took 10 minutes. Exactly. Today's no different, just a bigger washing machine. They rode in Obi's truck, passing through a landscape of contrasts, abandoned storefronts and boarded-up houses, giving way to the gleaming financial district, where glass towers reflected prosperity. The testing facility stood beside the main headquarters, modest in appearance, but hiding cutting-edge technology within. Obi's truck merged into the line of vehicles carrying other candidates. Marigold glimpsed her competition, mostly middle-aged men with expensive toolkits, dressed in the uniforms of major automakers. Look at them, Obi said, nodding toward the crowd at the gate. Half of them probably already make 6 figures. $1 million is just bragging rights for those guys. But Marigold's eyes fixed on someone else. A young woman in her 20s with tied-back red hair carrying a plain canvas bag. Unlike the polished uniforms, she wore real work clothes stained with the grit and grease of everyday mechanics. That's Evangeline Sterling, Obi explained, noticing Marie's gaze. My daughter. Didn't expect to see her here. She's studying mechanical engineering at college, but she's always preferred getting her hands dirty over sitting in a lecture hall. He paused, softening as Evangeline waved from across the lot. I guess intelligence runs in the blood one way or another. Inside, the scale of the competition unfolded like a massive stage. Rows of identical testing stations filled the vast space, each one equipped with a diagnostic engine to measure mechanical skill. Overhead, a digital clock counted down, while white-coated technicians moved like referees preparing for a contest unlike any other. At the center, Bartholomew Nash stood at the control podium, his voice booming across the factory floor. Good morning, candidates. Welcome to the preliminary evaluation round of the Ashworth Engineering Challenge. You have 45 minutes to complete a series of diagnostic tasks designed to test mechanical reasoning and problem solving. Marigold was assigned to Station 17 between an older mechanic from Detroit and Evangeline Sterling. The man introduced himself as Pete Morrison, boasting 43 years with heavy industrial machinery. His handshake was bone-crushing, his confidence laced with arrogance. "No offense, kid, but this isn't a science fair," he sneered. "These machines are precision instruments. They take real expertise." Before Marigold could answer, Evangeline leaned over calm and steady. "The funny thing about precision machines is they usually respond better to understanding than to ego." Pete's face darkened, but before he could retort, the starting bell rang. Each candidate faced a 4-cylinder engine rigged with multiple faults. The task: identify the problems, explain the causes, and propose fixes within the time limit. Marie followed the steps Obi had drilled into her. "First, listen." She started the engine immediately, recognizing the irregular rhythm that signaled a timing issue. "Second, observe." Oil pressure was fine, but the fuel system showed signs of blockage. "Third, touch." Her small hands traced the machine, feeling vibrations and heat, searching for the hidden clues. Around her, candidates worked feverishly, relying on checklists and computer readouts. They looked like chess pieces moved by textbooks. But Mari noticed something different. While they wrestled with their engines, hers seemed almost to whisper the answers. She uncovered the loosened timing chain, causing misfires, a small gap in the intake manifold throwing off the air-fuel mixture, and most cleverly hidden a partially clogged fuel injector, making the engine stumble like it had deeper internal damage. "Stop," Nash's voice boomed. Mari set her tools neatly aside. The engine in front of her now purred smoothly. Results varied. Pete had found 2 problems, but fumbled with the injector. Evangeline diagnosed everything, but struggled with the repair. "Candidates, please step away while the technicians assess your work," Nash instructed. "You will receive the results within the hour." The waiting room felt like a doctor's office, hushed and tense. Marigold sat beside Evangeline, who smiled warmly, despite being her rival. "You think you did well?" Evangeline asked. "I don't know," Marie admitted. "I just know the engine sounded happy when I finished, but I'm not sure that's enough." Evangeline chuckled softly. "Engines don't lie. If it runs right, you did it right." She studied Mari closely. "You're Obi Sterling's daughter, aren't you? He taught me how to listen to machines. He used to mention you said your mechanical intuition was something no school could ever teach." Before Mari could reply, Nash returned with a clipboard, his expression unreadable. "Here are the names of those advancing to the next round." He read the list alphabetically. Henderson Patricia, Morrison Peter, Sterling Evangeline. Mari's heart sank. The list continued without her. She imagined her father's disappointment in the observation area. She thought of Bertie still fighting for breath, their kitchen table still buried in bills. Then suddenly, Hutchkins Marigold. The name tore through the silence. It took her a moment to realize it was her own. A 9-year-old black girl from Steelton's poorest neighborhood had somehow made it into the next round alongside seasoned professionals. "Congratulations," Evangeline said, extending her hand. "Looks like we'll see each other again tomorrow." Outside the facility, Obi clapped Mari on the shoulder, pride glowing in his eyes. "I knew you could do it." "How did it feel fixing that engine?" Mari looked up, her face shining. "It felt like coming home, like it was just waiting for someone to understand it." By evening, the news had spread across the housing complex. The Hutchkins dinner turned into a community gathering, neighbors arriving with food and encouragement. For Mari, it was only the beginning. But for everyone else, it was the reason they needed to believe again. Pastor Blake prayed aloud. "Lord, we do not ask for victory, only for wisdom. We do not ask for glory, only for grace. Guide this child's hands with understanding, not ambition." That night, Mari sat beside Bertie, reading him stories of children who dared to do the impossible. His breathing was rough, but his eyes glowed with pride. "Mari," he whispered, "what if you fix it tomorrow? Then we'll have the money for your medicine." She answered, her heart trembling. "And if you don't?" She hesitated, torn between comforting lies and painful truth. Then she chose honesty. "Then we'll find another way. We always do." In the darkness of Steelton, as the city drifted in and out of sleep beneath the distant wail of factory whistles, Marigold lay awake. Somewhere inside that flawless engine was a flaw that had outwitted the brightest minds. But machines don't lie. Either they work or they don't. Tomorrow, she would learn whether a child's intuition could rise above formal knowledge, whether hope could outweigh the weight of the impossible. The call came at 3:47 in the morning, tearing through Marigold's restless dreams, visions of engines dissolving into smoke whenever she touched them. Her father's voice carried through the thin wall, low and urgent, the tone of a man speaking only in emergencies. "Yeah, we'll be there right away," Clement said. His words dropped into the silent dark like stones, warning that this dawn would bring a test far greater than any exam. The dry click of the old rotary phone echoed as her father hung up. Barefoot Marigold stepped into the living room, her heart already bracing for what she knew she'd find. Bertie sat slumped against their father's chest, his small frame trembling, each breath sharp and shallow like wind forced through a narrow pipe. His lips had turned a frightening shade of blue-purple, and Marigold's stomach knotted with fear. "The hospital?" she asked, though the answer was obvious. Clement nodded, his voice calm, but his eyes betraying panic. "Dr. Cross says his oxygen levels are dangerously low. They need to run tests, maybe keep him overnight." The words sliced through her because for them, every emergency meant another bill they couldn't pay, dragging the family closer to ruin. The ride to Steelton General Hospital felt like a dream, half fogged with fear. Streetlights flickered yellow across the empty post-industrial city. Bertie drifted in and out of consciousness on his sister's shoulder, his breath so faint and uneven that Marigold counted each pause between inhales, convinced her watchfulness alone kept him alive. At the ER entrance, Dr. Millicent Cross was already waiting. Her silver hair was tousled, her lab coat thrown hastily over nightclothes. At 58, she had treated generations of Steelton's children, watching economic decline turn into malnutrition, chronic illness left untreated, and families forced to choose between medicine and rent. "How long has he been like this?" she asked, taking Bertie with practiced efficiency. "Since midnight," Clement answered. His inhaler stopped working. Dr. Cross nodded grimly. "We'll stabilize his breathing and order chest x-rays, but his condition is worsening faster than expected. The treatments I mentioned last month are no longer optional, they're mandatory." Through the glass, Marigold watched her little brother surrounded by machines that beeped and blinked. Oxygen tubes curled across his pale face monitors, showing erratic numbers. The sight filled her with a choking anger, a helpless fury trapped in her chest. Her father sank into a plastic chair, his hands trembling as they cradled his head. "Today is your big day, the engine test," he murmured. Marigold spun toward him, disbelieving. "I can't leave Bertie now." But Clement's voice hardened like steel. "You can. You must. $1 million isn't money anymore. It's the only chance your brother has." Responsibility settled over her like a lead blanket. All her earlier worries about engineering details shrank in comparison to this truth. Failure meant watching her brother fade away. "What if I can't do it? What if I freeze?" she whispered. Clement pulled her close, his calloused palm against her cheek. "Then at least you tried." "But Mari, I've seen you solve problems that stump people twice your age. If anyone can spot what the others missed, it's you." An hour later, Dr. Cross returned with cautious hope in her eyes. "We've stabilized him. The nebulizer helped open his lungs, but his breathing is still badly compromised. I recommend immediate consultation with a pediatric pulmonologist." Clement swallowed hard. "How much will that cost?" "The consultation alone is $1,500, not including the specialized treatments that would follow." Her voice softened, worn from years of speaking numbers, forever out of reach for families like theirs. "Without it, his lungs will sustain permanent damage within months." Silence crushed the room. Then Marigold rose, her back straight, her childhood seeming to fall away. "I have to fix that engine." The words were simple, but they rang like a vow. By 7:30, she stood inside Ashworth headquarters. The other candidates gathered in the staging area, brimming with confidence. Pete Morrison bragged loudly about fuel injection timing to 2 mechanics. Evangeline Sterling approached with concern. "You look like you haven't slept." What happened? And with a strange, unshakable trust, Mari told her everything, the emergency, Dr. Cross's warning, the fear that clung to her. Evangeline went quiet, then nodded. "Then for you, this isn't about money anymore, it's about time. When I was your age, my father told me machines don't care about fear or expectation. They just want to be understood. So when you walk in there, don't think about money or pressure. Just listen to the machine." Her words still echoed when Bartholomew Nash entered with a team of engineers and supervisors. Today he wore a plain shirt, but his sharp eyes were still like blades. He surveyed the 7 finalists. "Welcome to the final round. Each of you will have 60 minutes in the main lab to diagnose and repair the prototype engine. Rules are simple work alone. Use any available tools and document all reasoning. Be warned, this machine has already been examined by some of the finest minds in the industry. Every standard method has failed. Success will demand thinking beyond tradition." One by one, the candidates went in. Each emerged an hour later with the heavy look of defeat. Pete Morrison stormed out after 43 minutes, throwing down his wrench in frustration. "Hutchkins, Marigold, you're up." The lab opened before her like another world. Air filtered crisp and clean, computer screens glowing with endless data, and at the center, the machine that had humbled 30 engineers. It gleamed under fluorescent light like a mechanical statue waiting to be awakened. Beside it stood Dr. Reginald Cross Bartholomew's longtime rival, arms folded, voice cold. "Miss Hutchkins, I'll be observing and recording your process. State your initial assessment." Marigold stepped forward slowly, eyes sweeping across every detail. Cooling system intact, fuel lines tight, wiring correct. Yet something felt hollow. "It's too quiet," she said. "What was that?" Dr. Cross frowned. Mari explained, "Every engine has a personality even when it's off. This one feels empty, as if something inside is missing." He scribbled notes with skepticism. "The engine has been inspected thoroughly. No components are missing." But Marigold barely heard him. She was listening to the faintest whispers of metal as she turned parts, searching for the music of the machine. Step by step, she tested. Cylinder compression normal. Ignition timing correct. Fuel pressure safe. By theory, the engine should run flawlessly. Yet, when she turned the key, only a hollow crank echoed back. 20 minutes slipped away before her fingers found the detail that changed everything. Buried beneath a snarl of wires hidden behind the intake manifold was a single bolt painted to blend with its surroundings, turned loose by 3/4 of a rotation. The bolt anchoring the flywheel. Marigold froze, heart hammering. One tiny bolt, yet enough to turn a perfect machine into a lifeless hunk of metal. The flywheel connecting the engine to the transmission, stabilizing all its rotations, had been loosened with surgical precision. Not enough to cause visible damage, but just enough to throw off the ignition rhythm. "Every test came back clean," she whispered, "because the flaw isn't in the parts themselves. It's in the relationship between them." "Dr. Cross," she said aloud, voice trembling but firm. "I think I've found it." At that moment, her entire world narrowed to a single bolt. If she was right, she would prove a child's intuition had bested the elite. If she was wrong, it was only the desperate delusion of a girl trying to save her brother. But as she picked up the wrench, Marigold felt a certainty beyond book knowledge, a faith born of listening to machines. Sometimes the most intricate problems yield to the simplest solutions. And sometimes a 9-year-old girl can see what 30 engineers missed. The wrench felt heavy as lead in her small hand. The clock showed 37 minutes remaining, but time stretched thick and slow. Dr. Reginald Cross leaned in, skepticism etched into his face. "Miss Hutchkins, let me be clear. The flywheel assembly has been thoroughly inspected by our team. If it had been loose, it would have been tightened immediately." Mari didn't look up. "When was it last checked?" "Excuse me, the flywheel bolt. When was the torque last measured?" Even as she asked, her fingertips felt the subtle give of the threads. Metal expands and contracts with temperature. A bolt can meet spec 1 month, then shift after shipping or environmental change. Cross flipped through documents, tension flashing across his features. "The engine was shipped from Detroit 6 weeks ago. Yes, there were temperature fluctuations in transit." Mari nodded. "That's the theory, right?" She turned the wrench, feeling the bolt move ever so slightly. But because everyone assumed it was correct, no one thought to check again. No one questioned whether the obviously true was actually true. Her words landed like an accusation, and for the first time, Cross's expression faltered. "Even if you're right." He tried to salvage a margin this small wouldn't be enough to stall the engine entirely. The tolerances are designed to absorb minor errors. Mari stopped, her voice steady, far beyond her years. "Obi always told me an engine is like a musical instrument. A piano that's almost in tune still sounds terrible. This machine is nearly perfect, but nearly will never be enough when it comes to ignition timing. She tightened slowly, counting each turn until a faint click echoed a sound so small it could have been missed. But to Mari, it was the machine's sigh of relief. "All done," she said, stepping back. "Start it." Cross pressed the button reluctantly, expecting the familiar screech of failure. Instead, the engine roared to life on the very first turn. Gone were the rattles and stutters. What filled the room now was a strong, steady hum precise as a mechanical symphony. Warning lights blinked green in unison. Performance readings shot past expectations, and emission levels dropped so low that even environmental regulators would have been stunned. Cross froze, his clipboard slipping from his hands. Impossible. How did 30 engineers miss something so basic? Mari calmly gathered her tools, placing each one back exactly where it belonged, just as Obi had taught her. Maybe because they were searching for something complicated. When people believe the problem must be hard, they stop seeing the simple answers. The door burst open. Bartholomew Nash rushed in, his face caught between suspicion, reverence, and near worship. Behind him, a team of technicians stood in stunned silence, all eyes fixed on the engine running flawlessly. "Is it true?" His voice cracked. "The girl fixed it." The engine answered for her, purring without a hitch. Nash approached as if he were a pilgrim before a relic, his trembling hand hovering, afraid to touch and ruin the miracle. 37 minutes, he whispered. "She diagnosed and corrected what our entire department failed to solve for months in 37 minutes. Mari closed the toolbox with a crisp snap, turned and said evenly, "Engines always want to run. They're just waiting for someone to listen." The news spread through Ashworth Industries like wildfire. By the time Mari stepped into the grand lobby, clusters of employees were already whispering, their eyes wide with awe. At the reception desk stood Evangeline Sterling, beaming as she pulled Mari into a proud embrace. "I knew you could do it. My dad always said you were special, but this is beyond anything I imagined." Mari pulled back, urgency flashing in her eyes. "I have to get to the hospital right now. Bertie's waiting. Dr. Cross said it's getting worse." Bartholomew appeared beside them, still dazed. "Miss Hutchkins, there are formalities. Contracts, press announcements, the awards ceremony." "How long will that take?" "Normally several hours, but this is different. I'll expedite everything. Written confirmation this afternoon, funds transferred within 24 hours. The ride back to Steelton General felt like crossing two worlds. Just 2 hours earlier, she had been a desperate child with a borrowed toolbox. Now she was the youngest black millionaire in the city, the girl who had cracked the riddle that shook an industry. Yet all of it boiled down to one thought: Bertie needed her now. They reached the hospital. Clement was already waiting at the door, his face shadowed with bad news. "Dr. Cross wants to see us right away. Bertie just had another attack." Inside the office, cluttered with x-rays and lab reports, Dr. Cross looked exhausted, her aged eyes heavy with guilt. She looked up, asking almost as a courtesy, "How did the engine trial go?" "I fixed it," Mari answered quickly. "We'll have the money for my brother's treatment immediately." The doctor's silver brows arched high in astonishment. "You really solved it." "At your age," Clement nodded, but Mari cut in, her voice trembling. "What about Bertie? How is he?" Dr. Cross shuffled the files, her tone grave. "His lung function has dropped significantly since morning. We don't have much time." A specialist she had just consulted had confirmed the diagnosis: severe asthma, complicated by chronic bronchitis, already edging toward early respiratory failure. The medical terms blurred together like a foreign language, but Mari grasped the one thing that mattered: her brother was far sicker than she had imagined, and time was running out faster than money could fix. "What does he need?" Clement asked, his voice steady, though his eyes blazed with fear. Dr. Cross replied, "Immediate transfer to Riley Children's Hospital in Indianapolis. Their pediatric pulmonary unit has saved countless cases like his. With proper treatment, the prognosis is very good. Without it," she let the silence finish her sentence. "And the cost," Clement pressed. She hesitated, then delivered the weight. "Just the emergency package transport and the first week of intensive care runs around $400,000. Long-term treatment could rise to $700,000. Mari felt the $1 million, the number that had seemed endless in the morning, shrink to a fragile pebble before the tidal wave of medical bills. but she clenched her fists. It's enough. 1 million will cover everything. The words were firm spoken more as self-conviction than reassurance. Dr. Cross nodded. If managed carefully, that amount should cover his full treatment and ongoing care. They returned to the hospital room. Bertie lay against the white pillows machines buzzing at his side. His breathing was shallow, but his eyes lit up at the sight of his sister. "Did you fix the engine?" He whispered, his voice like a faint breeze, but filled with trust. Mari sat beside him, smiling. "I did, and now I'll fix you too." How she held his fragile hand bones light as if made of faith instead of calcium. "The same way I listen to engines. I'll listen to you, and I won't stop until I find the way." Outside the window, Steelton lay bathed in new light. Smokestacks and abandoned factories no longer looked like ruins. They were steps toward hope. Exactly 4 hours later, the specialized transport team from Riley Children's arrived. Marie watched from the hallway window as paramedics rolled in advanced equipment moving with swift, practiced precision. The white ambulance bore cheerful designs meant to comfort children, but inside it was a mobile ICU. "It's really happening," Clement murmured, signing stacks of paperwork he never would have dreamed of yesterday. Each signature meant unthinkable amounts of money, but today he could do it because of his daughter. Mari, still in her oil-stained clothes, stood nearby, dazed by the surreal sight, a 9-year-old black girl about to spend nearly all of her $1 million prize to buy her brother's breath. The lead paramedic stepped forward. "We need a family member to ride along." The trip to Indianapolis takes about 2 hours. The patient will be calmer with someone familiar beside him. Clement began to speak, but Mari stepped up. "I'll go." Her father looked at her, seeing the same resolve he had once glimpsed every time she faced an impossible problem. "Mari, you've carried so much already. Rest, let me go." But she shook her head. "He'll only be calm with me. Remember the last X-ray?" He cried until I told him the chest camera was just helping him get better. The paramedic hesitated, then nodded. "Normally only adults ride along, but in this case, we'll allow it. But you must follow every safety rule." 30 minutes later, Mari sat strapped into the fold-down seat of the most advanced ambulance she had ever seen. Monitors displayed real-time heart rate and oxygen levels. A ventilator synchronized with each fragile breath. Bertie lay on the stretcher like a tiny bed surrounded by tubes and wires, but his eyes still searched for his sister. "Mari," he wheezed through the oxygen mask. "We're really going to the special hospital, right?" "Yes, we are," she said, ignoring reminders not to touch the equipment, and squeezed his hand. "The best doctors are waiting for you. They've helped thousands of kids like you. You'll stay with me." The simple question carried all the fear of a 6-year-old trapped in a body that refused to breathe. Mari squeezed his hand tighter. "I'll be here as long as they let me. And even when I'm not in the room, I'll be right outside finding a way to help you get better." Through the ambulance window, Indianapolis rose on the horizon, its skyline so different from Steelton's decay. Riley Children's Hospital spanned several city blocks in the medical district, its modern design both reassuring and warm, as though built to embrace exhausted families. At the emergency entrance waited Dr. Obadiah Fletcher, a legend in pediatric pulmonology. At 64, he had spent 4 decades saving children once thought beyond hope. His presence at the door was proof of how serious Bertie's case was, and of how far the $1 million prize had already opened a path to survival. "Miss Hutchkins." He extended his hand to Mari with the respect reserved for an adult. "I heard you solved a technical problem that had defeated some of the finest experts." Mari blushed. "I was just lucky." Fletcher smiled kindly. "In medicine, I've learned luck usually finds those who observe carefully and dare to trust their instincts. Your brother is fortunate to have a sister who fights for him without stopping." They brought Bertie upstairs to the pediatric ICU, compared to the emergency ward back in Steelton. This was another world entirely, gleaming surfaces, purified air machines, humming smoothly with what seemed like limitless resources. Bertie's room looked out over a small garden where families could find moments of peace in the storm. His hospital bed was larger than the one in their apartment, surrounded by monitors displaying constant data, with computer systems adjusting treatments automatically to every tiny change. "The first stage will focus on stabilizing his breathing and reducing airway inflammation," Dr. Fletcher explained as the nurses connected the machines. We'll use bronchodilators, anti-inflammatories, and respiratory therapy. Step by step, we'll bring his lungs back." Marigold watched the medical team at work with the same intensity she once gave to diagnosing engines. Each person had a role, every movement fit together like gears in a finely tuned machine, all serving one purpose: to help a child breathe more easily. To her, it was as beautiful as watching Obi restore an old car, nothing wasted, nothing out of rhythm. "How long will recovery take?" Mari asked softly. "Typically 4 to 6 weeks of intensive treatment, followed by several months of monitoring and rehab," one doctor answered. "But children Birdie's age usually respond very well. I'm optimistic about his long-term outlook." Those words lit a spark of hope in a heart worn thin by fear. As evening fell over Indianapolis, Mari sat alone with her brother in the new room. The medical team had finished the initial exams and quietly left, giving the family some privacy. Her father was handling admission paperwork and searching for temporary housing, leaving the siblings to face the whirlwind of changes in what felt like the longest day of their lives. Mari Birdie spoke, his voice clearer now, thanks to the machine assisting his lungs. "Do we really have $1 million?" She nodded, settling into the folding chair that would be her bed for the weeks ahead. "Yes, but more important than money, we have something else." "What's that?" "The chance to choose our future instead of just waiting for a miracle." Birdie nodded, his young eyes suddenly wiser from illness. "Dad was afraid we'd run out of choices. Now we have enough choices to find the right path, no matter how long it takes." Outside the window, the city lights glimmered like a promise that medicine and determination could bend fate. Mari realized the real victory wasn't the money, nor even the improvement in her brother's breathing. It was the truth she had discovered: impossible problems sometimes reveal their solutions to those patient enough to listen, to watch, and to believe in the simple path. Her phone buzzed a message from Evangeline Sterling. "Just saw the news about your win. Dad says the engine is still running flawlessly. Interested in a summer internship once you're old enough? The company needs minds like yours." Mari smiled, too tired to type a reply. But inside, a new vision of her future began to take root. That night, as Birdie breathed easier with the help of medicine and machines, Mari allowed herself to believe that even the toughest problems can be solved if someone dares to listen. Out in the hallway, the steady footsteps of night shift nurses echoed, and the beeping of monitors became the fragile music of lives being held on. Somewhere in a distant lab, the Ashworth engine still ran smoothly, its flywheel steady. But for Mari, the most precious machine was her brother's chest, relearning the rhythm of life. 3 weeks later, Mari knew the routines of Riley Children's Hospital as well as she knew the firing sequence of an engine. At 6:30 each morning, Dr. Fletcher and his team made rounds, checking every child with the precision of engineers examining each bolt. Every 4 hours, the automated medication system chimed, reminding families of the treatment cycles. By afternoon, therapy rooms filled with the sound of children struggling to reclaim the strength illness had stolen. But today brought a new visitor. Cordelia Nash arrived in the hospital lobby, her face as severe as when she handled social service cases. At just a glance, Mari's stomach tightened. Even with life changing so quickly, the fear of being separated from her father and brother still ran deep. Cordelia approached, her tone polite. "I have some official matters to finalize." Clement stepped out of the hospital cafe holding a cup of coffee that cost more than their weekly groceries back home. His face tensed defensively as soon as he saw her. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Nash?" "On the contrary," she replied. "I'm here to officially close your family's file and remove the children's names from the at-risk list." Relief washed over Clement's face, and Mari's eyes stung with tears. The storm cloud that had hung above them for months finally lifted. Cordelia continued, "Your finances are stable now, Birdie is receiving proper care, and Marigold's educational needs are being addressed." "Educational needs?" Mari asked, startled. Cordelia smiled, the first genuine smile Mari had ever seen from her. "Did you think your achievement would go unnoticed? The educational community has been talking about you." At that moment, the elevator doors opened. A woman stepped out, Judge Serafina Mills. At 72, she had spent 40 years on the family court bench. Her presence here signaled something beyond routine bureaucracy. Cordelia rose surprised. "Your Honor, I didn't expect you to come in person." Judge Mills walked slowly, her gaze gentle. "Some matters require it." Mrs. Nash, Miss Hutchkins, congratulations. Mari stood awkwardly. I don't understand why I'm being congratulated. The judge smiled. Because you've proven that intelligence takes many forms, and sometimes the system overlooks extraordinary talent. Your solution has sparked important discussions. She pulled a folder from her bag. The state of Indiana has just created a scholarship fund for gifted children from disadvantaged backgrounds. You are the very first recipient. Clement could hardly believe it. What does the scholarship cover? Full educational support through graduate school, Judge Mills said. Private tutors, advanced summer programs, college prep. Some universities are already asking if you join their summer advising programs with their engineering departments. Through the window, Marie saw Bertie working with a therapist. His skin rosier, oxygen levels rising, medication tapering down. She turned back, voice soft. May I have time to think about it? Judge Mills nodded, her look full of understanding. Of course. Your first priority is your brother's recovery and adjusting to change. This opportunity will wait. When the officials left, Marie returned to Bertie's side, helping him through the rest of his breathing exercises. She realized that sometimes miracles don't come from afar. They begin when a child dares to listen and believe in an answer that seems too simple to be true. Bertie's respiratory therapist, Karen, was a woman full of energy who specialized in working with children. Every day, she guided him patiently through breathing drills, expanding his lungs and teaching him to pace his breath. How's my favorite patient today? She laughed, adjusting a machine that looked half like a video game console and half like high-tech medical equipment. Better, Bertie said quietly, saving his strength for the words that mattered. Then he turned to his sister. Mari, tell her about the scholarship. Mari explained, and as she spoke, she realized something new. The same gift that let her see hidden patterns in machinery was now opening doors in education she had never imagined. Karen nodded. The way you talk about machines reminds me of the best doctors. They don't just treat symptoms, they look for the root cause. How do you mean? Mari asked. Take Bertie's illness. Most people see only wheezing, fatigue, and shortness of breath. But to cure it, you need to understand the inflammation, the narrowing airways, the weakened breathing muscles from years of compensation. Treat the root and the symptoms disappear. Mari shivered at the parallel to the Ashworth engine. 30 engineers had gotten lost in the obvious system's fuel ignition compression while missing the subtle imbalance of the flywheel. Medicine is just like mechanics, she murmured. Except the machine is alive. Karen smiled. Exactly. The best people are the ones who blend knowledge with intuition. By evening, the Indianapolis skyline lit up the hospital, settling into quiet. Mari slipped onto the rooftop garden, a space designed for families to find calm above the storm. The city lights stretched to the horizon like constellations of electricity glowing with hope. Her phone buzzed a message from Obie Sterling, heard about the scholarship. Couldn't be prouder. The garage is always open whenever you want to remember where you started. Mari smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. In just a few weeks, she had gone from poverty to security, from invisible student to a name on the lips of educators statewide, from helpless worry to someone capable of reshaping her fate. Most importantly, she had learned to trust her instincts, that sometimes the simplest answer is the one that changes everything. Mari, Bertie's voice drifted from the hospital room. She turned and saw her brother sitting upright in bed, breathing deeper, now the tubes around him looking more like supports than shackles. Can't sleep? She asked. I was thinking, when we go back to Steelton, what will it be like? The question carried more than addresses and apartments. It held his fear that though the walls of their life might not change, everything inside them already had. What do you want it to be? Mari asked. Bertie thought quietly, then said words that made her throat tighten. I want Dad not to be afraid anymore, and I want you to always fix the things everyone else says are broken. In the chaos of everything, the 6-year-old had spoken the heart of it. Their family had survived because one person refused to believe any problem was hopeless. I think I can do both, Mari whispered, squeezing his hand. Outside the window, the city moved in its rhythm of healing and hope. Somewhere in the night, an engine hummed like a background song, reminding her that anything broken could be tuned again if you had patience and the will to listen. Mari knew her real challenge was only beginning. It wasn't Ashworth's laboratory anymore, but the long road of restoring a family after the storm. Yet as she listened to Bertie's steady breaths, knowing she now had the means to face whatever came, She believed the solution was often as simple as refusing to give up. The next morning brought good news. Birdie had improved enough for doctors to discuss discharge. The words should have filled them with pure joy, yet Mari felt a tug of worry. Leaving behind advanced machines and constant supervision, would he really be safe? Dr. Fletcher reassured her. He's not just stable, he's better. The medication has controlled the inflammation and his breathing muscles are stronger. With continued treatment and regular checkups, the outlook is very good. Beside him stood Sarah Chen, a young medical student, her eyes bright with curiosity. She asked timidly, "Doctor, may I ask Mari something? I read about the engine challenge, and I see so many parallels to medicine." Fletcher smiled. "That's a good question. Mari, would you mind sharing?" Mari blinked in surprise, then answered, "Patients and machines both try to tell us what's wrong, but we have to listen the right way. Bird's breathing wasn't the same as ordinary wheezing. It sounded like something was blocking his air, not just irritation. And with that engine, the hollow sound meant something inside wasn't sinking." Sarah nodded, jotting notes eagerly. "So you look for what strays from the normal pattern instead of just following procedure?" "Yes," Mari replied. "But more than that, you try to understand what they need to work, right? Not just focus on what's broken." Fletcher exchanged a glance with his student, both recognizing the depth of thought insight that usually took years of clinical practice to develop. That's a very mature way of thinking, far beyond your age. Have you ever considered medicine as another path for your gift of analysis? The suggestion lingered in Murray's mind all the way back to Steelton, where she was due to meet Evangeline Ashworth. The industrial landscape she had once seen only as decay now looked different. Smokestacks and abandoned factories were no longer ruins, but puzzles waiting to be solved. At Ashworth Industries headquarters, Marie no longer felt small. The marble lobby, the swift rhythm of office workers, everything looked like a giant machine moving with purpose. This time, receptionist Diane Walsh greeted them with a warm smile instead of icy indifference. "Ms. Ashworth is waiting in the conference room upstairs." The conference room stretched across the top corner of the tower, its glass walls framing a sweeping view of Steelton's industrial quarter. The design was elegant but purposeful, a place where large decisions were made. Evangeline Ashworth stood by the window, her posture graceful, as if she were speaking to the sky itself. At 57, she needed no display of authority. Intellect and vision were enough. "Miss Hutchkins," she said warmly, turning with a genuine smile. "Thank you for coming even when your family still needs you so much." Mari replied softly, "I'm not sure what I can offer that your engineers haven't already tried." Ashworth gestured toward the polished wooden table, the sunlight reflecting as though the room hung between earth and sky. "That's exactly what I want to discuss. The way you solved the prototype proved something sometimes traditional knowledge blinds us from the simple solutions." She activated the wall screen, displaying schematics of car systems dotted with red marks. "We have 17 projects stalled: fuel efficiency, emission control, streamlining production. The engineers are stuck." Mari studied the diagrams, seeing delicate connections between components, like the puzzles she had loved working through with Obi in his garage. "What kind of consulting are you suggesting?" Clement asked carefully. Ashworth answered immediately. "Nothing that interferes with school or family. Just a few visits each month to observe and offer insight. The compensation will reflect the value of your perspective, not just ours." The number she named made Clement's eyes widen. It was higher than his best years at the plant. Mari lifted her gaze. "I want to see the actual machines, not just diagrams." Evangeline smiled. "I was waiting for you to say that. Would you like to visit our research center? The facility on the edge of Steelton was as modern as a university campus. The labs looked more like workshops filled with prototype vehicles, experimental components, and engineers tangled in projects that might change transportation." Mari drifted toward a testing station where a team was stymied by an electric engine. The theory was flawless, but in practice, efficiency plateaued at 87%. "What have you tried?" she asked. A middle-aged engineer sighed. "Everything. Adjusted magnetic fields, rewound coils, swapped materials. Nothing pushes it higher." Mari placed her hand on the casing, feeling the warmth and vibration. "It's hotter on this side," she noted. "We know. But the thermal imaging shows even heat distribution," he said. Mari smiled slightly. "Then maybe the engine is telling us something the numbers aren't." The engineer stared as though hearing a foreign tongue. She continued, "Sometimes the clue is in the contradiction what you feel and hear not what the data insists. This uneven heat is the engine's way of speaking." At 9 years old, Mari understood that true talent wasn't just solving isolated problems, but learning to listen to complex systems, whether machines, human bodies, or a fragile family. The greatest secrets often reveal themselves to those patient enough and brave enough to believe in simple answers. When they finally returned to Steelton, everything familiar looked changed, as though the picture itself had been recolored. The cracked streets, shuttered shops were the same, but the eyes of neighbors were different. Sympathy had turned into curiosity and admiration. Mrs. Patterson met them at the door with a tray of food and news. "The whole neighborhood has been following Bertie's updates on the hospital site. And Marie, reporters have been calling non-stop about the engine. I told them they'll just have to wait until you're back." Marie, flushed cameras made her more nervous than any engine. The apartment, already small, felt even tighter after weeks in the spacious hospital. But Bertie was delighted, touching every familiar thing, leaning into the worn sofa and laughing. "We're home." His breathing was steady now, no longer labored. Clement stood at the kitchen door, staring at the shabby room with conflicted eyes. The pile of overdue medical bills that once sat on the table was gone, replaced by neat bank statements, numbers that seemed to belong to another family. "Maybe we should find a new place," he murmured, still unsure if he believed in the possibility. Marie answered gently, "Maybe we wait until we understand what our new normal really is." A knock interrupted. Obie Sterling stood in the hall, toolbox in one hand and a neatly wrapped package in the other. His warm smile was the same as the day Marie first wandered into his garage. "First day back home, I thought you could use some company, and I wanted to return something that belongs to you." Inside was the socket wrench set Marie had once used to tighten the flywheel, now engraved with a small brass plate, property of Marigold Hutchkins, the problem solver. She lifted the tools, her chest filling with memory. "These are what changed everything," she whispered. Obie shook his head gently. "No, you changed everything. Tools are just tools. It was your mind and your heart that fixed that engine." That afternoon, they walked back to the old garage. The smell of grease, the clink of metal echoed like a familiar song. Here, Marie could just be herself, a girl who loved coaxing stubborn machines into harmony, not the child prodigy under bright lights. In that space, all pressure melted away, leaving only the whisper of engines and the simple joy of listening. Late that afternoon, Evangeline Sterling walked into the garage, a college textbook still clutched under her arm, clearly having driven straight from Indianapolis. Her presence felt like a bridge between Marigold's old world, where grease and bolts stained her fingernails, and the new door of opportunity opening wider each day. So Evangeline asked, settling onto the familiar wooden crate beside the workbench, "How does it feel to be famous?" Marie gave a shy smile. "Strange. Everyone expects me to change, but I still feel like myself." Evangeline laughed softly, her face reflecting an understanding born of her own experience. "You'll see. Once you start consulting with corporations, they'll treat you like you have magic in your hands, when really all you're doing is listening to the machines better than they can." That reminder sent Marie's thoughts straight back to the unresolved problem of the electric motor at the Ashworth Research Center. Even during the long days at the hospital waiting for Bertie's treatments, she hadn't stopped thinking about the strange heat distribution. "I think I've figured out the cause," she said firmly. Evangeline's attention sharpened instantly. Marie moved to the whiteboard in the garage and began sketching the system from memory. Her strokes were more confident now, after weeks of explaining complicated mechanics to both medical students and seasoned engineers. The computer model assumes the magnets are perfectly aligned, but what if they're just slightly off? She traced magnetic field lines, showing how tiny errors could build into a distorted field that drained power. Evangeline's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant. All this time, we've been fixing the wrong problem." She grinned. "Tomorrow, come with me to see my mother. Tell her your idea yourself." That night, Steelton lay quiet under the glow of industrial lamps. Marie sat on the fire escape, staring at the abandoned factories, once symbols of failure, now reminders of where she had begun. Bertie slipped out to join her, his breathing easier now. "Do you think we'll always stay here?" he asked. Marie shrugged. "I don't know. But maybe it's not about where you are, it's about who you're with. The 6-year-old, who had brushed so close to the edge of life, spoke with a wisdom beyond his years. Home is the place where you feel safe enough to dream about tomorrow. Mari's throat tightened, realizing his hard-earned insight was the distillation of every long night spent fighting illness. A message buzzed on her phone, breaking her reverie. It was from Dr. Fletcher. Recheck results look good. Birdie is recovering right on schedule. Hope your family is finding its way back to normal. Mari stared at the word normal. Maybe normal wasn't about recreating the past. It was learning to accept the present, however different it looked. Birdie leaned close, whispering, "When you fix the next broken machine, will you take me along? I want to learn how to listen too." She blinked in surprise, then laughed. That, she realized, was the heart of it all, never giving up when others insisted something was broken forever. The next morning, Steelton's 9-year-old black consultant stepped once again into Ashworth's halls. Each new problem, whether in electric motors or manufacturing processes, was like a puzzle piece in the blueprint of a cleaner, more efficient future. But Mari knew her greatest contribution wasn't solving any single failure. It was proving that intelligence comes in many forms, that age and degrees sometimes fade beside the persistence of curiosity and the patience to truly listen. 6 months later, Mari stood in the grand lecture hall of the Indiana Institute of Technology. Hundreds of students and faculty waited for her, the keynote speaker at the annual engineering conference. The host introduced her. "Please welcome Marigold Hutchkins, age 9, who has shown the world that innovation is not bound by age, degree, or years of experience." Applause thundered through the hall, shaking her like the center of a storm of electricity. Her first slide lit up the Ashworth prototype engine inside the gleaming lab. 30 brilliant engineers failed to start this machine, Mari began. Not because they lacked knowledge, but because knowledge itself made them look in the wrong places. Below, students leaned forward, professors exchanged astonished glances. Mari went on. The problem wasn't in the parts themselves, but in how they related to each other. Like in life, a small misalignment in connections can silence an entire system. The next slide showed the electric motor she had diagnosed. On paper, the models said everything was perfect, but the real motor told a different story. It ran hot on one side, vibrated faintly like it was crying for help. All I did was listen and find the answer hidden in the small errors everyone else ignored. The hall fell silent, then erupted in applause. Marigold Hutchkins, a little black girl from a struggling apartment in Steelton, once on the brink of losing her brother, now stood teaching grown men and women a simple truth. Sometimes the solutions to the most complex problems are found by listening more closely, not by thinking harder. I'm not telling you this to dismiss the value of education or expertise. Mari paused, looking directly into faces where some students still seemed skeptical. They are absolutely vital. But sometimes the vast library of knowledge can blind us to a simple explanation. She drew a breath, her voice steady. That engine didn't care how old I was or what degree hung on my wall. It only wanted to be heard and understood. A hand shot up from the third row. The student's voice carried a defensive edge. "Are you saying formal education is counterproductive?" Mari smiled gently, knowing her reply might shape how hundreds of future engineers saw their work. Not counterproductive, but sometimes incomplete. You're learning principles humanity took centuries to uncover, gaining tools I've never even touched. But please hold on to your primal curiosity. That urge to ask why something sounds wrong, even when every test says it's right. She told them about Birdie, how he recovered not through a sudden miracle, but through steady treatment that addressed root causes rather than masking symptoms. She spoke of Dr. Fletcher, who was both highly trained and brave enough to listen when an unusual diagnosis didn't fit the standard path. The best doctors, mechanics, or engineers I've ever met, Mari declared, share one trait: they trust their knowledge, but also their intuition. They listen when reality contradicts expectation. From there, her talk shifted into practice. She shared methods for spotting patterns, for noticing tiny mismatches in a chain of logic that otherwise seemed airtight. Students scribbled notes. Professors nodded. By the time the Q&A began, the mood had changed. No longer defensive, the room buzzed with raised hands and bright eyes hungry for new perspectives. A graduate student in sustainable energy admitted he'd faced efficiency losses just like the Ashworth team. An industrial manufacturing professor asked how listen, look, touch methods might strengthen quality control. But the moment that touched Mari most came at the very end, when a young woman fought her way forward. "I'm Maria Santos, a sophomore in mechanical engineering. I wanted to thank you for talking about the diversity of intelligence." The name startled Mari. "You're Oilia's daughter, aren't you? She works night shifts cleaning at Ashworth." Maria nodded, eyes brimming. "My mother always told me intelligence doesn't have a single mold. But lately I've been discouraged because I think differently than my classmates. I thought maybe I didn't belong in this field." Mari squeezed her hand gently. "That difference might be your greatest strength. The problems that stump everyone else often yield only to those who see from outside the frame." At that moment, Clement and Bertie walked up. Bertie, his face glowing after making a full recovery, ran into his sister's arms. Clement asked, pride shining in his eyes, "How did it go?" "Honey." Marie smiled. "Really well. People are curious about different ways of thinking." On the drive back to Steelton, fields of green spring wheat drifted past the windows. Mari thought back from that desperate night she had run to Obi's garage for comfort. She had opened a path that led to so much more: consulting contracts with major companies, full scholarships through college, and most importantly, the understanding that true ability lies in the power to listen. From the back seat, Bertie spoke softly. "Hey sis, when I grow up, I want to fix things like you do." Marie turned, smiling. "Fix what exactly?" He grinned, his eyes sparkling. "Everything. Machines, people, even towns that have forgotten how to run." Mari laughed, though her heart swelled with emotion. Perhaps their next journey would be planting belief in a community that within every person was an ability waiting to be awakened. That evening, they gathered at Sterling's garage, dinner spread out in the form of simple Chinese takeout boxes from Main Street. Obi asked, "So how are the college students?" Mari chuckled. At first it was intimidating, but really they just wanted to know if there was another way to look at a problem. Evangeline nodded in agreement. "Exactly. College can trick us into thinking there's only one path, but it's diversity of thought that makes human intelligence strong." In the warm conversation, Bertie suddenly blurted out an idea. "Why don't you start a class here in Steelton, sis? Teach kids like us how to see patterns the way you do. We don't have fancy machines, but we've got eyes, ears, and curiosity." The idea hung in the air for a moment until Clement spoke softly. "Yes, let's start right here. Steelton needs fixing, just like a machine that hasn't run smoothly in years." As night fell, the clatter of tools in the little garage went quiet. Mari sat in thought, remembering the prototype engine in Ashworth's lab, still running flawlessly. Yet she realized the machine that truly mattered was not made of pistons or wires, but of community, family, and the fragile bonds that connect people. And those too could be repaired if someone was patient enough to listen. The story that had begun with a 9-year-old black girl in a rundown apartment fixing an impossible engine had become proof that intelligence takes many forms and solutions can emerge from the most unlikely places. Tomorrow, Marie would return to consulting, to new projects and bigger challenges. But tonight, in the familiar smell of grease and oil inside Obi's garage, she was simply Marigold Hutchkins, a sister, a daughter, and above all, a solver of the impossible. Her journey was only beginning, and the lesson she carried forward was simple, yet enduring. Sometimes the answers to the most complicated problems come from daring to believe they might be far simpler than anyone expects. And that was the unbelievable journey of little Marigold Hutchkins, from a struggling apartment in Steelton to the moment that stunned the world with an engine once thought impossible to fix. Her story reminds us that sometimes the answers to the most complicated problems come from the most unexpected places. If you believe that intelligence can take many forms, share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss more inspiring and heartfelt stories.